Hello and welcome to Keep Right On, the Birmingham City podcast brought to you by Birmingham Live. I'm Brian Dick and I'm joined as ever by our Blues reporter, Alex Dickin. Hi, Alex.
Hello, Brian.
I'm also delighted to say, not that Alex isn't enough for all of us, but I'm delighted to say I'm joined by a very special guest, former Birmingham City player and manager, Gary Rowett, who might just have a little bit more time on his hands than he would normally have, having would normally be the case, having recently left Millwall after 4 years, which in management terms is centuries. In a previous life, during his time in charge at St Andrews, he also spent a couple of years answering stupid questions from me, and despite that, he's kindly agreed to field some more. Gary, thanks for joining us. Welcome to Keep Right On. And first up, how are you enjoying yourself with your nose not quite so firmly at the grindstone, assuming it's not?
No, it's a pleasure to join you guys first and foremost. And I definitely can't remember too many stupid questions, Brian.
You might be revising that opinion in about 20 minutes, but there we go.
But I've been away a long time, so maybe my memory's not as good as it used to be. Yeah, just doing what most people do when you've left a. Look, I'm always sort of remiss to say stressful job. I think it's a great job. It's a privilege to be a manager, one of very few managers, head coaches in professional football. So, but it's 24/7. So, having spent 4 years travelling up and down the motorway to London and back because my family are based in Derbyshire, it's nice to be back home. It's nice to wake up in your own bed. It's nice to be able to take one of your kids to school, because I've only got one young enough to actually go to school anymore, which is quite a sad indictment of how old I am. But and nice to do a few different things. So enjoying the breather. Who knows how long it'll be? And happy to chat to you guys today.
Big 5-0 next year, Gary.
Why did you have to mention that? Listen,
you brought a page.
Actually, I'm going to start saying what I really think about the questions now. Big 5-0. Yeah, I like most blokes. I'm trying not to think about it really.
If I ever get there, I'll let you know how I feel. Gary, what have you been up to? I'm sure it just hasn't been a case of dog walking and taking kids to school. No doubt you've been keeping up to date with Championship football and probably Premier League football and probably even European football as well. What do you do? How do you keep yourself in touch?
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways of keeping in touch, but I think also you have to try and relax and spend a bit of time doing the things you want to do as well. So, I'm a keen runner. I always have been. It keeps me away from thinking 24/7. Obviously, I did London for the Doyle family to raise money when I was at Blues, and that kind of started it a little bit. A week after I left Millwall, I did the Battersea Marathon. My kids did the half marathon, so that was quite nice to go there without having to think about travelling. I think that the game was Preston away, so I would have had to travel from Preston away the night before to get there. So it's nice to just do something without the thought of the stress of a result or standing on the sideline, the day before. Little bits planned. My kids are going skiing in January. My son does Valencia Marathon in December. So again, doing things that you can't normally do, But in terms of staying in touch with the game and results, I don't think you're ever too far away from that, are you? I mean, I'm such a fan of football. It's such a passion of mine. But watching games on TV, whether that's Championship, whether that's Premier League, is just what you do. It's just what you do for entertainment. It's what you do. I don't watch it from a professional aspect all the time. Sometimes I'll switch on. The Chelsea game the other night, Chelsea-Man City, I just switched it on and watched it. I wasn't sat there tactically trying to work out. Of course, I'm not going to tactically try and work out what Pep's doing and criticise it for one. But secondly, you can just watch it for fun and enjoyment. So, and then plenty of media commitments, which I'm fortunate enough to be able to do, which gives me that chance to be part of it anyway. It gives me a chance to watch lots of Championship matches. So, yeah, those things are really, really important, and those things are great opportunities to stay in touch with the game.
Gary, are you eager to get back in quickly? And what kind of next job would appeal to you?
I think it's always difficult to put a timeline as a manager when you're out of work. I don't think it's the sort of thing that you can do. When I left Birmingham originally, I was 3 months out of work. I got offered a job the next day, and it's always that temptation to try and get back in as quick as you can, because there's the fear of, I don't want to be out of work. I think as you get a little bit more experienced, you learn that actually sometimes sometimes having a little breather, stepping away a little bit and being able to sort of at least assess the opportunities that might come your way or might not come your way. After Stoke, I was out for 9 months. If it's the right opportunity, I would go back in tomorrow and manage. I've got no problem doing that energy-wise or commitment-wise. But at the same time, I'm happy to stay out of it for a little while if it means getting the right chance and the right club at the right time. And the problem as a manager is, that could be a day, that could be a week, that could be 2 years. That's holding your nerve and knowing what you want next, really. So yeah, I suppose I'm fortunate enough. This isn't my first job or my second job where I'm desperate to not be out of work for long. I've been here before, so I think I've learned to be perhaps a little bit more patient.
We were doing some research yesterday and noticed that when you finished a full championship season, you've not been outside the top 11 at Millwall. It was 8th, 11th, 9th, and 8th. Obviously finished 6th at Derby as well. 2 10th placed at Blues. Do you feel like, based on those stats, that you're due probably a bigger job, something that can get you into those top 6 places again?
No, I think football's so difficult because it changes so quickly. I mean, you're seeing at the moment a cycle of lots of young managers that perhaps have more been more seen as more as coaches. I think it's difficult sometimes, and I put myself in a slightly more experienced bracket, that if you look at your body of work, I think over a long period of time at different clubs, you can't get success or you can't get those type of finishes without being a good coach, without being a good organiser, without being a good tactician. So I think that sometimes, you have to accept what your next job might be, and you have to accept where you think that job might be, and look at that as whether you're prepared to take those jobs now. So, I know, for example, realistically, I'm not going to go and jump into a Premier League. I know people have done it, but I'm not going to jump into a Premier League job. I'm not going to jump into probably a top championship job. So therefore, which clubs realistically are the ones that you probably would take. What I've always said is, for me, it's about the club having a clear vision. It's about the club having a little bit of ambition in their own right. It doesn't have to be a massive club. It has to be a club that really wants to at least try to achieve something, rather than just survive. And also, you have to be excited by it. Now, sometimes you could be more excited by a club in League One than you can be with a club in a different division. Do you know what I mean? So it doesn't necessarily. I've never put a limitation or a box around, what type of club would be the right one next. And of course, as a manager, sometimes you can't pick and choose. You have to see what's available.
Do you think, Gary, that it would be a case of if you are to get to Premier League, I'm inferring that is still the ambition. Everyone wants to manage at the top level, right? Yeah.
Do you know what? I've never had that as my ambition. It's funny because I had a lot of people said to me, you must want to manage. Like when I was sort of, at Blues and we were going really, really well. It was, at one stage, I think there was only really like 4 or 5 young England managers out there, or at that level. And people say, "Oh, you must want to manage England, or must want to manage in the Premier League." I've never had that as a set ambition. I got offered Stoke when I was at Derby, 6 months after I was at Derby in the Premier League. So, I've had an opportunity to take a Premier League job. I turned it down for different reasons, and I don't think that's ever been my ambition. My ambition's always been, I think like most of us in football, to keep at least feeling like you're moving forward, feel like you're learning, and feel like, most importantly, that you're enjoying it. I think that's the biggest challenge. I think if football ever becomes a chore, certainly football management, which it can do at times, and any job can do at times, but I think sometimes that's when you perhaps feel it's the right time to move on. So that's always been my aim. My ambition has always been to enjoy what I do, and wherever that takes me. I've been so lucky to manage the clubs that I've managed, and hopefully that's not going to stop anytime soon.
I remember the couple of years you had at Blues quite fondly. Now it's probably fair to say that the ownership situation was suboptimal, but in terms of what you got going on the pitch, it did fit that description that you've just had there. You did seem to be progressing. How do you look back on those couple of years in charge, Gary? You'll have obviously had more of a fuller picture than me, just looking at results and what was happening on the pitch. But how do you look back on the madness, I guess, that might have been going around at the time?
Yeah, do you know what? I mean, firstly, as an ex-player at Birmingham, it was an exciting time for me. I was at Burton at the time, and of course, I'd had a couple of opportunities at championship level, but not felt as though it was the right one. And then when Birmingham came in, I remember getting the call and somebody said, "Wow, have you seen the Birmingham result?" And I said, "No, it went 8-0. I think it was 8-1 or whatever it was." And I was like, "What? They've won 8-0? Thinking, well, I've got no chance of getting the job now. So no, lost 8-0. I was like, wow. I think everyone saw that as a negative. Really, I saw that as a huge positive, because if you're a manager going in somewhere, and certainly you'd rather go in when they've just been defeated heavily, because the only way is up. I could lose the next game 6-0 and it'd be an improvement. So first of all, there was a huge excitement for me going to the club. It was the first time I'd managed at championship level, and there was always that little bit of, can we do this? Can we do what we did at Burton, and can we transfer it to Birmingham? And that was it. I look back and I remember those first few days. There was things that we did early on that really changed the culture. I think I remember just a little story, and I'm sort of digressing a little bit from the performance and everything, but these things are just as important. So I'd heard that the meeting room had become quite a stressful place previously. I suppose like you do when you lose a lot of games, when there's a lot of finger pointing, there's a lot of negativity, and the players would go in the meeting room and they'd be sort of thinking, God, I'm going to get hammered again, or shown a video nasty. So I think it was the first time we went in there, we'd been measured for suits. I'll try and shorten the story. Been measured for suits, and Big Saley, the guy had come up and looked at Saley and yeah, I've got your measurements. So Saley was like, are you sure that you want to actually measure me? He went, no, I've got them. He tried this suit on, and this suit, well, I've never seen anything like it. It was like a short sleeve suit. I've never seen it. It was about 6 inches up his arm, about 6 inches up his leg. And as he tried it on, I looked at him and he went, no. I went, yeah. And he knew exactly, he'd worked with me before, he knew exactly what was happening. So anyway, we were about to start this meeting with all the players in there. It was relatively new. We hadn't had too many meetings. And I said, is everyone in here? And I got one of his staff at the back to say, no, Saley's not in here. So I've opened the door, and obviously at Wastill's, the corridor wasn't too far away from the other room. I said, Saley, are you coming in? So Saley's walked down the corridor, and honestly, he's walked in this room, and obviously he's about 6'7", and the players could not stop laughing. Honestly, Darren Randolph was still laughing 2 hours later in training, and I don't know whether the players would look back and just think that was a bit of humour, but for us, it was an icebreaker. It was almost to let them know this is going to be fun. This is we're going to be relaxed. We're going to have good fun, but then after that also follows the structure and. I think very, very quickly we got the team believing. I remember the Watford game. I think it was we played Wolves first game, didn't we? And they were top of the league. To get a clean sheet and a 0-0 away from home was fantastic. We rode our luck a little bit. We had to defend, but was great. And then the next game, I think the team hadn't won for a long, long time at home. So to get that first win so soon and to feel the atmosphere, I've got to be honest, that was one of the standout moments in football for me, and I've managed over 500 games now, but it was such a great feeling. There was a belief in the stadium, there was an excitement in the stadium, and the players finally felt they could win games at home. So yeah, it was a brilliant sort of opening feeling for me as Birmingham manager. And then it was actually quite easy, Brian. I mean, if you think about the ownership at the time, there was only really Panos there as sort of representative of the owners. Most of my day-to-day stuff was with Jules, with Joe, with Roger, Gary. The four of those guys were absolutely brilliant, and they kept the place together around that time. And along with Panos, 'cause I had a good relationship with Panos as well. And there was a lot of positivity, and there was a lot of what can we do to help you. There was real limitations on what we could spend. I remember, when I went in, my budget, if you think now to championship budget, my budget was I could bring one player in on $5,000 a week. And we brought Michael Morrison in, of course, which turned out to probably be a better signing than even I'd hoped it would. So when I look back to that job, and it was probably a harder job than even I thought it was, but because I was so young and enthusiastic, I probably didn't see it like that. Maybe that was why we had that success, particularly in that first season.
Yeah, I've got a Mark Sale story as well. I'm sure we've got time for it. He was on loan at Plymouth donkeys years ago now, and I'd gone to watch Plymouth play at Chester, it was, and in the pub afterwards, and this Plymouth fan came up to me, clearly thinking I was Mark Sale, and he said, "Oh, well played." And in a rare moment of insight, I instantly knew that he'd made a mistake, and he thought I was Mark Sale. So I went, "Yeah, cheers, thanks, mate." And he goes, "Can I buy you a pint?" So
Wow.
I allowed him to buy me a couple of drinks on the pretense that I was Mark Sale. So yeah,
I'm going to tell him Friday. I'm meeting him for coffee Friday, so I'm going to tell him. that story. It goes you 2 points.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, shows my level of ambition if I'm choosing Saley to impersonate, doesn't it? But yeah, 2 10th place finishes, pretty much uniformly positive. Was there a glass ceiling, Gary, just in terms of taking that next step and breaking into the playoffs?
No, I don't think there was. I think I remember distinctly. The new owners were very, very keen to push forward, and one thing I'd said along the way, I remember having a meeting with them and meeting them for the first time at St Andrews, and it was, typically new owners saying, right, this is what we can, we can give you this, we can give you that, we give you that, and it was all these really quite extreme things. And I said, look, to take the next step, it's really, really simple, because you have to think about the 2 years prior and the people that have worked really, really hard to get to that point. And I see it a lot with these clubs, and I saw it at Blues afterwards, where someone will go, right, to get better, let's go and get this player who's on 3 times more than anyone else, and we think that's going to make the difference. Well, the challenge with that is all the people have worked really hard and now looking at that player and they're actually feeling like they haven't been rewarded. So there's a real negativity in doing that if you're not careful. So all I said is, look, we need to bring players in on the next level, and we had some brilliant, brilliant targets. I remember at the time, I think we were looking at Johnny Russell, Aaron Moy, a couple of other players, and there were some really exciting players that we felt could take us to the next level. But along with that, I also said, look, you then need to reward the players that are here, that have done so well. People like Michael Morrison, that have been on relatively low championship money, but you needed to get them somewhere in between. And the same with the staff. I said, if you're going to come in and spend lots of money, I think a really good way would be to reward the staff that had been there, because again, people have worked very hard. We had some brilliant, brilliant staff. The medical team were fantastic. The sports science team were fantastic. We had some really, really good people, and there was a great synergy at the club at the time. So, and I think in some ways that was kind of a start of probably that didn't quite go that way. I think if they'd have taken those, it's easy for me to say, but I think if we'd have taken those steps, we were making linear progression. And I think for a club like Birmingham, that's what you have to do. You can't just jump to the next level. You cannot do that. It's impossible to do. You have to just make a linear progression each season. And sometimes that might take 2-3 seasons. And, I don't know whether certain ownership groups might not be patient enough to do that, but that's the only way you can do it, in my opinion. You can't just jump to be a top team in the championship. Even spending 50 million, you can waste 40 of it, and not get the rewards or the culture right, because the culture is so important. So I think that was the next level. And I think, if I'm being honest, we wanted to get to that next level. I felt there was a great opportunity to get to that next level. But I suppose at that time it probably started to be less easy to do the day-to-day job and less easy to move forward with clarity, just because of a number of things. So yeah, it was a really pivotal time, I think. When you look back, you can see some of the steps that were made next, and you can see how maybe there were some of those mistakes that were made, and things that we'd preempted a little bit. There were things that you could see, if that happened, it wouldn't work. You can just tell the culture, and you can see what's going to happen. So
you weren't necessarily stunned when the call came that you'd lost your job. Then did you know before the Ipswich game?
No, I didn't know before the Ipswich game. It was actually quite funny in some ways, because I got a call the next morning. It was a day off. I was due to have a meeting in Derby on Pride Park, actually with a financial company, just for something I was doing at the time. I look back, I can't remember if it was Jules that rang me and said, the owners are over, they want to meet you. So I said, Jules, I've got a meeting. No, they want to meet you at 11 o'clock. So I thought, I hung up and I said, well, can you get them to do like maybe 1 o'clock? And my missus said, maybe you should just go. So I cancelled my meeting, went. I wasn't sure what it was about. There were things at the time, but look, I think it's always easy, when people in football are outraged by the decision. But usually when you're on the inside, you can see certain things that, there's little things going on. Like I'd just been offered a new contract, but I turned it down for different reasons. It wasn't because I wanted to leave. There was this thing around at the time that I wanted to leave, or I was speaking to other clubs or whatever. But, it's really simple as a manager. I had a clause in my contract that if a club paid it and I wanted to go, I could go. Nobody could stop me. So if I wanted to go, I would have gone. It's really, really simple. And there was a lot of outside interest from other clubs because we'd done a good job. But so I turned up at the meeting and there were two representatives from the club and not the new owners. And they gave me the news, and I understand it because they want to do it to your face. They want to do it in person because a lot of managers, a club doesn't want a manager to say they sacked me by text or they sacked me over the phone. So I understood it wasn't as easy as being open and clear. And the only thing I asked at the time is they had all the staff at the training ground, and they were going to tell them straight away. And all I said to them is, look, at least give me the decency to go and tell the players and go and tell the staff myself. So I drove from the ground over to Wast Hills, told all the lads who were in a little bit of shock, told the staff. And that was that. That was kind of how it was done, obviously. I can't go into too much detail, as I'm sure you're aware. But that was more or less it. So it wasn't – it was a shock to a certain degree, but it wasn't completely a shock when I look back. And I think I made mistakes around that time as well. I'll be open enough to admit, I think there were mistakes I made. I think maybe I could have been a little bit more patient and dealt with it in a different way. But we wanted to get to the next level quickly. And when you want to do that, sometimes you end up battling things rather than try to, accept certain things are out of your control, really.
Because obviously Birmingham have just gone through that managerial change where perhaps the excuse from the ownership group was that they weren't aligned with the manager. Is it hard to understand that because you're the manager, you probably feel like the route to progression, but then the new guys come in and they probably want it, tomorrow.
Look, I think I've always said the same thing. If you're an owner and you spend a hell of a lot of money on buying a football club and trying to move a football club forward, and like any business, you have the right to make the decisions you feel are the right thing. I don't mean anyone would tell any of us how to spend our money. Apart from my missus, to be fair, she's very good at it. But so I think it's difficult to criticise decisions, because I think most decisions are made with the right intention. I think the challenge for Birmingham, from my perspective, is that with the new ownership, it seemed and I can only judge things from afar, of course, when you're not on the inside, but it seemed like they've made some really good decisions. It seemed like the PR and the stuff that was said in the press just put the club in such a positive place and put the fans in such a positive place. But, it felt like they could have just rolled forward doing what they're doing, and actually they're in a really positive period of time, and it's been a while since maybe the fans have felt that. So of course, to make the change, and then the change perhaps not working as well as they'd like to, it feels a little bit like back to square one, for the fans, and I think that's a difficult thing. I think that any club can go whatever direction they want, but I think sometimes it's also easy to misconstrue a manager. Like if someone like John, probably a little bit like me, where you try to say it how it is, you probably don't try to over-egg performances. I remember when I was at Derby, again, I'll digress slightly, but there's context to it. I remember when I was at Derby, we had the top scorer in the division. We scored 3 or more goals than more than any other team in the division. I think we're the 4th highest scorers in the division. Yet I got the same label, it's boring football. And I'm looking at it going, I think that's unfair. I think it's actually unfair. If I look at Blues, John probably had a little bit similar where, you're sensible, you make good decisions, but then people then attribute, that's, maybe it needs to be more exciting. I don't know. And actually to win games of football at championship level with not a top 6 budget is bloody hard to do. And it takes good tactics, and it takes good training, and it takes good coaching, and it takes attacking football at the right time, and it takes playing in a way that the team suits. You know, if you've got a lot of pace in forward areas, you know, take someone like Ollie Burke, for example. You know, if you play possession-based football with Ollie Burke in the team, it's very difficult for him to do. Actually, his attributes are he needs space. So good management sometimes is putting players in positions where they can excel and they can actually outperform what they do. So I get it, but everyone's philosophy is different. And for me, everyone's managerial philosophy or every club's philosophy is, you know, you're going to be dictated to by results as well. You know, and I think that ultimately, if you win games, people like the football. If you win games and can attack, then even better. If you win games, attack and score loads of goals, even better. But it's difficult for every team to do that. And that's certainly something that Birmingham are finding out. It's not easy to have utopia every game, win and finish near the top of the league. Some good teams in the division.
Gary, you've seen the answer to this question from both sides of the fence, both as a player and as a manager. Just talk us through some of the actual practicalities of if you're set up as John was setting up his team in a 4-2-3-1 to set up to counter attack. Then the next day, you're a player, you've got a manager comes in and says, right, I want you to make the pitch as big as possible, and we're going to keep the ball and play out. How difficult is that? As you know, what are some of the difficulties that players would experience doing that?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of factors to that. I think one, as a manager, you either go into a club. There's no right or wrong. You know, you either go into a club and you look at the players, and I think sometimes good management is about trying to maximise performance, but looking at what the players are capable of doing. You know, you can if you've got 25 players to work with and you've got to pick 11, the 11 you pick have to be able to do what you want to do. You know, it's as simple as that. You know, and if they can't, you're asking for trouble. Or you can go in and you can just say, this is how we're going to play, and we're going to do it. And you've got to hope that positivity and that structure and that, you know, almost bloody mindedness drags the players with you, and actually they just get it and they do it. So there's two ways of doing it, and different managers will have different approaches. You know, certainly I would go for the first one. That's how I've always seen it. But then I've never had promotion out of a championship, so I can't say that the other one's not better. But from a player, look, I think most players do the same. We've seen it before. A manager can be as popular as you want. You know, the day I walk out of Millwall or Birmingham or Derby, you know, the next day players are laughing and joking and they're trying to do the best for the new manager. That's just how it works. And they'll all say the same things. This is great. We're really loving working with this manager. You know, everyone says the same things, don't they? Come on, it's as a player, I don't think it's an issue. I think you take on board any ideas, but also as a group, sometimes you know what you're good at and you know what's got you to where you are over a long period of time. And you know, sometimes it's hard to flip too much. I mean, you know, for Birmingham, let's take Birmingham, for example. Again, this is not me being critical of a style of play, but I watched, when we played you guys at St Andrews earlier in the season, I think we put Ruddy under a little bit of pressure on goal kicks, and a couple of them, you know, he wasn't as accurate as I think he's a fantastic goalkeeper, got great stature, great size, makes big saves, you know, commands his box. But then, you know, asking him to play intricate football out from the back might actually put him under a little bit of pressure and might actually be something he can't do. Look, it might be something he's brilliant at. He's an experienced keeper, but I'm just using an example. You're asking him to build up from goal kicks and take massive risks. That might be something that's really difficult. And you know, if you're going to put a player under pressure like that, you might not get the right performances from them. So I think it's trying to not take players out their comfort zone too far, and it's trying to do something that they can build their confidence doing. You know, and that may be why, you know, Wayne's comments after 3 games were, look, I've spoke to the players, you know, and maybe we have to adjust 1 or 2 things. So I don't want to judge any manager. I don't want to judge any style of play, because that's not for me to do. And I've been on the other end of it. Yeah. But it is difficult sometimes as a player to completely flip and play away if they're not capable of doing it. And I suppose that's the debate. I'm not saying they're not, but that's the debate as a manager and as a player, really.
I know as you obviously played against Blues in beginning of September, I think, and it was a 1-1. I know you've done lots of analysis and things of the team before you played that game, but do you think Blues have the players now to play this way that, you know, Rooney wants, and that the other managers, this expansive brand of football that, Rooney thinks can get them out of the league?
Yeah, look, I mean, my opinion probably is that, if you're going to try and take on Leeds, Southampton and Leicester in a passing game of football, my theory is you're probably always going to lose that. You might well be able to beat a lot of the other teams in the division and get you in that mix. So it's difficult. It's a difficult question to answer. What I would say is, if I look at Blues' squad, the first thing you look at, they've got lots of. First thing that struck me when we played them, they've got good energy. They've got good athleticism. When you look at, particularly one of the strengths early season, I felt was, and I didn't think it would be actually looking at it, but I think watching them play, Sunjic and Bielik in the heart of midfield just gave them a little platform. But if you're asking them to go and play high up the pitch and then, lots of space around them, I didn't think that was probably their strengths. I think they're the type of two players that can sit in there and give you a nice base, but they're probably going to sit a little bit deeper, and then that energy is probably going to mean that, your strengths are you're probably going to end up being a little bit of a counter-attacking team because of the players you've got in the side. I think any team can adjust. I think any team can change style. It's difficult for me to turn around and say, I think this team is X, because obviously my opinion's not really valid, in terms of what another manager's trying to do. But I think you look at the strengths. For me, I don't think there's anything wrong with being I think there's different ways to be a front foot attacking team. I think you can go and press teams to death where that athleticism helps. I think that's difficult to do in every game in a championship, because I think good teams play through you. And I think this season, if you look at the division's very different. With a lot more possession-based teams. I think it's very, very hard to press teams high up the pitch for long periods of time. But you can try and do that. I think you can be an exciting counter-attacking team. I think if you look at the Premier League, I think Liverpool are very different to Man City. I think Chelsea are very different to Tottenham. There's different ways to spin it back, but I think all of those teams are very exciting to watch. So yeah, look, I don't think you have to be one for or another. I think that's down to the manager, and you're judged on results and what people think of the performances.
There is a theory that's kind of that's come from this managerial change, and you can probably answer it more generally, but that transitional teams don't do as well in the Championship, that they don't get promoted, that it's the promoted teams are the ones that play the better football, that play through the thirds and press high. Yeah,
because most of those teams that come down have got the money to do that. Have got the players to do that. My theory, I can only answer it on my theory. My theory was always, let's say you've got a 12th best budget in the division, which certainly we didn't have in my time there. I think the budget would have probably doubled since that time. Let's say you've got the 12th best budget. You've got to be a damn good team to compete in the top echelons of the Championship these days. So for me, you always had to find something that was different. What can be our strength? What could be something that we can be better than every other team at doing? Now, you take someone like a Sheffield United. Sheffield United weren't a possession-based team. They were a front foot, all-out, attacking, energetic, run teams into the ground type of team. If you look at Leeds this season, they've got so much pace in wide areas with Dan James, Somerville, players like that, and they are actually, if you watch them, they're actually a counter-attacking team, and they're very, very good at it. You look at Southampton, are a possession-based team, and so are Leicester. And Leicester are a little bit in between, actually. Everyone wants to play beautiful football. Everyone wants to get a team out of the division, but you have to be capable of doing it. And there's an ideology and there's an ideal and there's a realism. And you've got to try and find the balance in between, in my opinion. But again, that's not me talking about Birmingham. That's me talking about any team in a championship. I mean, you also have to find a little bit of something that, the fan base needs or wants. For example, when I'm at Millwall, Millwall don't want 20 passes at the back. Millwall want quick football, the ball going forward. So I think you also have to fit a little bit of that into the culture of what's required. There's no doubt nowadays that there's a first for possession football. There's a first for playing out from the back. There's a first for that type of football a little bit more than something a little bit more pragmatic. So I understand most clubs and most players going into it. That's a narrative that everybody wants to try to show and extol. But I think you want to win games and you want to be in the top six. And, let's take Birmingham, for example. Whatever John was doing, whatever that was, I don't know, but they were 5th or 6th in the league. So, to a certain degree, it was working well, and that's just me looking from the outside. It's not a criticism of anyone. That's just, he's obviously doing a very, very good job.
I know you've watched a lot of football in the Championship this season as well. Who are you backing? Who do you think are the main contenders for promotion?
Well, I think Leicester, obviously. I mean, if you look at their squad, Leicester's squad's fantastic, but I think also Maresca's done a tremendous job. I think they've got a lovely balance. They've got strength, they've got power, and they've got technicality. If you're the Leicester manager at the moment, yes, you've got to coach them, and yes, you've got to create that synergy, and that's a really difficult thing to do. But you can press high up, you can drop in and counter-attack, you can play possession-based, you can play whatever you want, and you've got a chance because you have a real balance there. And I think you look at the other teams that promote that have been relegated, it's actually hard to see past those teams. I think Leeds have got, the quality amongst, they've kept all their Premier League players virtually. And I think Southampton also slowly but surely, I think Russell Martin, again, there's no right or wrong. He's got a brand of football that he lives and dies by. He finished sort of mid-table in the Championship with Swansea, has a great opportunity because of his culture and philosophy, and looks as though bit by bit, that's going to get his Southampton team up and around it. So fair play to him. I don't think there's any right or wrong. But if I look at those teams, it's hard to see past those teams really at the moment. I think Ipswich have done a brilliant job as well, but it's like anything, I suppose. I'm like everyone where you think, wow, if they can keep doing that all season, then that is incredible. And they're probably the one that, you look at their squad, it doesn't look like a top-end Championship squad, and they've played good football, but they've played a blend. And they've probably been the most impressive. Whether they can get promoted, obviously it's a long old season in the Championship, and many things can play a factor.
Yeah, they are very much the outlier, aren't they? And just finally, Gary, the last question, bringing you to another outlier, a man you'd have known when he was a child. What have you made of Jude Bellingham's rise to the very top of world football? Let's call it for what it is. There's not many people playing better football on the planet than Jude at the moment. No,
it's incredible. I mean, I know Christian Speakman quite well, and when I was at Blues, there was this big push for Jude and Joe were so good in the academy, and they stood out so much. And they used to bring him down to, again, I'm not one of these who are going to jump on the back of Bellingham's career because it's been fantastic, but he used to bring him down to my office on a match day sometimes, and it was all about this kid's going to be special, particularly Jude in particular. And at the time, I think every top club in Europe had watched him, and this is when he was like 13 or 14. I couldn't say at that point that I knew because I didn't, and I hadn't seen loads. I'd seen little bits of his footage, and he looked a tremendous player. But I think the bit that's impressed me the most and impressed everybody the most is every little challenge. He's just took it. He's took it so easily, and he looks so comfortable. I mean, what kid goes to Real Madrid at 18, 19 years old and becomes their best player almost and their standout player within 2 or 3 months? Most people take time to settle. Most people have a wobble in their career. Most people have a little bit of uncertainty. But he just seems so confident and there seems to be such a great support group around him, with his family, that they just seem to make good decisions, which we've seen so many players make poor decisions because of, agents' advice or external pressure or financial pressure or whatever that is. But they seem to just be doing all the right things. So, yeah, look, if he can stay fit and he can stay healthy, then, he's going to be, and he already probably is, one of the best players in the world at this current moment, which is crazy to think that when he first broke it. I remember when Blues retired his shirt and I thought, wow, that's a strange thing to do for a young lad who's done nothing in the game really, has played very few games. I think even Jude said that, but when you look at it now, whether you agree with the decision or not, I think it shows how people knew how good he was going to be. And he's only at the start of his career, so you don't want to go overboard, or you don't want to give him too much praise, but it's great to watch, and it's nice to see a young boy coming through the ranks of Birmingham, becoming such a global star. So yeah, long may it continue.
Gary, thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate your thoughts and your insight. Alex, thank you very much for your time, and thank you everyone for listening as well. It's been hope you agree. It's been a really interesting and insightful interview with Gary. looking forward to seeing you back on a championship touchline somewhere soon, Gary.
Cheers, guys. Yeah, appreciate the time. Enjoyed it.